Hi, welcome to another session on our microdosing and psychedelic retreats summit from Heart Mind Institute. My name is Dr. Fleet Mall, the founder of Heart Mind Institute and your host for this interview. And I'm thrilled to be here today with friend and colleague, Dave Asprey. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, Fleet. Happy to be here with you.
Oh, it's so great to see you again. We got to have a nice time in Boston just recently and enjoyed a great dinner there. And I've been looking forward to this interview because this is just a topic have a tremendous amount of fascination for. So let's see where it goes. So I'm going to familiarize people with your background for those who may not be familiar, probably very few, but at any rate. Dave Asprey is a pioneering entrepreneur, author, and biohacker, best known as the founder of Bulletproof Coffee and the creator of the biohacking movement. As the CEO of Upgrade Labs and host of Human Upgrade Podcast, he has spent decades exploring human performance, neuroscience, and longevity. A four-time New York Times bestselling author, Dave has reshaped the health and wellness industry through innovation and self-experimentation. After experiencing severe health challenges in his late 20s, including cognitive decline, prediabetes, and rapid aging, Dave embarked on a mission to reclaim his health. Through rigorous self-experimentation, he lost over 100 pounds, improved his cognitive function, and coined the term biohacking, now recognized in Merriam-Webster. His work has led to the creation of the Bulletproof Diet and the popularization of MCT oil, collagen protein, and functional coffee, markets now worth billions of dollars. As the founder of 40 Years of Zen, he also applies neuroscience to peak mental performance. Dave's work has been featured on Good Morning America, CNN, Wired, the New York Times, and more. His books include The Bulletproof Diet, Superhuman, Smarter Not Harder, further cementing his influence in the health optimization and longevity world. And I did mention your more recent book, Heavily Meditated, which I highly recommend.
Thank you.
I wonder if you could connect, a lot of people are probably familiar with your origin story, maybe not all, but, you, I think, grew up in a home where there was mold and that contributed, and maybe there were other contributing factors, but you were experiencing cognitive issues and obesity and just a lot of challenges in your adolescence and early adulthood, and you managed to turn that around dramatically. And as I described in your bio, as a result, developed this whole biohacking movement. And I wonder if there's some connection between, your ability to make that incredible transformation and what inspired you to really get serious about pivoting and reclaiming your health, and the whole world of psychedelics, expanded states, and microdosing. And what's the through line or the connection there?
Well, I started out life not particularly healthy. And people say, well, why? Well, there's not one reason for most things in your life. And if you're not happy, or you're stressed, you're anxious, there isn't a reason. In my case, there's some things that were important. There's a genetic thing. I also was born with a cord wrapped around my neck. So I came into the world believing in my body, not necessarily in my mind, that someone was trying to kill me. So there's a deep sense of a lack of safety that comes in. It's not a thinking or a rational thing like that. And it's something that was just omnipresent, and I just thought it was normal. And I also said, I got to get healthy. And I tried all the workout stuff that's supposed to work and all that. And I also knew I wasn't happy. So I tried the things that are supposed to work. I'm 23, and I'm in Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm the first guy to sell anything over the internet. Like, before e-commerce had a name, out of my dorm room, I sold a t-shirt that had this caffeine molecule on it. It said, caffeine, my drug of choice. Which, wait, is that a mind-altering drug that's acceptable and legal everywhere? Yeah, it is.
I think so.
So interesting. And let's not even talk about nicotine, which is another mind-altering drug that's used worldwide. So apparently some of them are okay, but a lot of other ones I was afraid of. And I also thought, I kind of want to try these, and had chances to try cannabis or something, but I didn't want to get, I want to know what I was getting. So it's part of this journey of just like, what's possible here? I tried being famous in that magazine and a bunch of other ones. I wasn't happy. 15 minutes of happiness. I tried getting married. That'll work. Didn't work. Got unmarried pretty quickly after that in my 20s. And then money. That's going to make me safe and happy. I made $6 million when I'm 26. Lost it when I was 28. It didn't make me happy either. And my God, nothing works here. So along the way, I said, I'm going to start meditating. I'll try that. Didn't get many results from it. I had a couple experiences that were really interesting. I flew to Amsterdam, and there I could get mushrooms legally. And now everyone's like, mushrooms, that's not a big deal. You can buy those anywhere. It was not like that in the 90s. You might see them at a few parties at a rave or something, but they were not something you'd find in common circulation, at least not in the successful circles where I was. So I tried them and thought, there's something interesting. I like this. I feel different. I feel better. And it lasted for a while. I also went down to Peru in 1999, and I said, I want to try ayahuasca at the guest house where I was staying. And they looked at me and they said, you're white. And I said, yeah, I know. It's only for locals. You wouldn't like it. And I said, I've done my research. I've read the books on DMT, and I really want to try this. So I found a shaman, and I did it. And my partner at the time changed her religion as a result. And I had some mystical experiences, and I thought there's something to this, but it didn't do it. Like I felt there's something, but I don't want to go do drugs all the time. So then I tried holotropic breathing, which is a replacement for LSD by Stan Grof, who, well, he used LSD on 3,000 patients legally in Czechoslovakia back in the 50s. And it blew my mind. And I actually saw more there than I did from psychedelics. And since that time, I've just said anything necessary on the planet that will make my brain work better, that will make me more aware of the environment, and make me more aware of myself is fair game. I've done this advanced neurofeedback practice. I've done a series of ketamine journeys, and I've become familiar with most of the psychedelics, with the exception of ibogaine, to the point that I use them in shamanic practice. I've gone through shamanic training, and I realized if you can do anything that will regulate your nervous system or regrow your brain by increasing BDNF, it's probably something that belongs in biohacking. Biohacking is about what are the tools to change your state. And sometimes it's breath work, and sometimes it's a certain molecule, and sometimes it's a certain practice. And why some of them are okay and some of them aren't isn't rational. And it should be rational. They should all be okay.
And this pathway for you has really been one of fairly courageous self-experimentation, and I think you probably even got yourself in trouble a few times, even physically. I mean, you've told stories of things you did, of packing yourself in ice and burning your skin and different things, and I'm sure there's all kinds of stories along there. But it's not just been reckless self; it's really been data-driven experimentation. You've been pretty methodical and pretty scientific about it. And so, where do you find microdosing psychedelics, which is sometimes they say subperceptual doses? I guess you might feel different over a long term, but they're certainly not psychoactive or psychedelic or hallucinatory. Microdosing psychedelics, where does that fit into the biohacker's toolkit, along with other things like supplementation, neurofeedback, quality of sleep, exercise, everything else?
Well, with biohacking, we pick a goal. And if your goal is cognitive enhancement, there are a lot of things you can do. I wrote a New York Times bestselling book on it. And the two primary things are increase mitochondrial energetics, make more energy in the brain. And then the other one is increase neuroplasticity. And there are various practices that can increase neuroplasticity via a compound called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or by NGF, nerve growth factor. And none of them work that well. There's lion's mane, there's a coffee berry extract, but the big guns are the psychedelics. LSD will do it, mushrooms will do it, ketamine will do it. And microdosing ketamine, not really a good idea because it's addictive. But LSD and mushrooms are worth microdosing. So about 10 years ago, I used James Fadiman protocol, and I did LSD microdosing, 5 micrograms. It's normally used about 5% of a dose. And I did it every day for a month. And there's different protocols every other day, things like that. And what I found was that it worked for cognitive enhancement about as well as some of the cognitive enhancing substances like aniracetam or piracetam that you could get without microdosing. So we'll say I was a little bit underwhelmed, but when you microdose these things, most companies that make them are putting 10, 15 micrograms because people want to feel it when they're microdosing, but then they're not microdosing. And I made a mistake when I was microdosing LSD. I didn't want to travel with a vial of water because of liquid requirements in airplanes. So I chopped a tab into 20 tiny pieces under a microscope. And maybe one of the pieces was a little bit bigger than the others. And I was on stage in front of a few hundred people and I told a couple of jokes I thought were really funny, and no one else thought they were funny. I thought, oh, good God, I might be a little bit high here. So I kind of, ramped it down. But I would say microdosing for people whose brains have not had any enhancement, you haven't done any health protocols, it can really help. But I would recommend you start with the basis. Are you eating enough of the right kinds of fats? Or have you turned down inflammation? And do you have a practice of exercise in the brain? If you're doing neurofeedback, you're doing breath work, you're doing a focused meditation practice, you will get better results with microdosing because the brain becomes younger and more plastic and easier to learn. It's remarkably safe for the vast majority of people. Even people with things like genetics that makes them more susceptible to serotonin overdose are unlikely to have problems with microdosing. So it seems like it's a safe and effective way to do it, to the point that I even invested in Paul Stamets's pharmaceutical company, which is combining psilocybin and lion's mane mushroom and another B vitamin. And this is the only treatment we found so far that will grow neurons throughout the entire brain. All the other BDNF things just grow the hippocampus. But this combination of three things as a pharmaceutical, stroke recovery from dementia, Alzheimer's, there's great hope for this. So yeah, microdosing has merit. I think there's a lot more around recovering from trauma and accessing new spiritual states that are available from larger doses, however. And where I focus today is using ketamine as an adjunct at 40 years of Zen. People come for 5 days. And what they do there is we use a low dose of ketamine to create neuroplasticity. And we measure brainwaves while you're doing it. So we know what it does. And then on one day, we do a ketamine journey. And I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world of psychedelics where people, they say, well, I did it. But they either did microdosing, didn't track results, didn't follow the protocol, or they're actually taking party doses and think they're microdosing. Or we have people who are just going out and having a good time. They're not doing the deep integration work that's required to use psychedelics and get the full results you can get. So it's sort of like you might be doing too much microdosing, or you're doing a full dose and you're not doing it right. So it's not just your intent, it's who are you working with when you do it, and what substance are you using, and is your brain supported energetically while you do it?
Mm-hmm. So I have a number of follow-up questions there. So you mentioned the Stamets protocol, and he includes niacin. And if you use regular niacin, it can have that pretty strong flush impact. And maybe that's part of what's my understanding from Paul is that the niacin, the purpose of that is to spread the molecule throughout the body more widely and efficiently at the cellular level. So is that flush necessary? Is it niacinamide that doesn't have the flush?
Niacinamide is what they market as flush-free niacin. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. So you need the niacin that makes you red and tingly. And if you wanted to take full advantage of it, you would also take something that makes your blood a little bit thinner, like fish oil or curcumin, which is a turmeric extract.
Mm-hmm.
If you did that, you also would take a nitric oxide donor, like there's N101 is a form, and my favorite is something called Vascanox.
Mm-hmm.
These are supplements you can order. Nitric oxide causes microcapillaries to dilate. And the idea here is that when these compounds are present, you need the microcapillaries open and your blood flowing really well. So I would add those as an adjunct if you're using the statement stack.
Mm-hmm. And so, you've done extensive self-experimentation, and at 40 years of Zen, you use neurofeedback equipment and so forth. You're measuring brain waves, but for the average microdoser, um, they're mostly going to focus on how they feel. Like, am I feeling anything? And I think one thing in the whole world of not just microdosing, but supplementation altogether, a lot of times we read the research or we suspect it's good for us or we think it's, obviously you've seen dramatic changes in your health over the long period, but in the short term, at sub-perceptual doses, how do we know if it's working and make those adjustments without having the equipment to, constantly doing blood work and doing neurofeedback?
Well, you might want to do a full dose so that you're certain you know what you've got, and you can maybe work on trust while you're there. And it's kind of funny. People get so worked up about microdosing. Look, you take your vitamin D. You're not going to feel vitamin D. You take it for a month or two, you might have all sorts of things get better, but it happens slowly. So why do you have any different standard for microdosing versus vitamin D? You're not supposed to feel either one of them the first day you take it. If you do, something's wrong. So take it for a couple months. But what you could track is you could track your quality of sleep, your dreams, and you could track your heart rate variability in the morning or your morning readiness score if you're using an Ultrahuman or an Aura or a Whoop, whatever sleep tracker. They're very common these days. So you should see changes, but they're not going to be immediate. They could be the first night, but they might be a week into it. And then after you've done your protocol for probably a couple of weeks to a month, stop doing it. And strangely, with cognitive enhancement substances, even the smart drugs, when you feel more like yourself, it's hard to notice. Like you'll feel a cup of coffee, but you won't feel a lot of the smart drugs that make your memory better. Because, I wanted a word and the word was there. And then you stop taking the enhancer, and the next day the word was harder to find. And you realize the lack of enhancement is much easier to spot. So do it for a month, get a new steady state, track what happened with your sleep monitoring stuff, and then quit and see if you notice a decline. Some people describe like a subtle shift in mood, like they're brighter, their mood is lifting. And that would make a lot of sense given what these things are doing. Anytime you make the brain younger, which is what happens when it's more neuroplastic, you do feel more energy, but it's very subtle. If you have long-term meditation practice, you'll probably feel it. If you don't, you probably won't.
So you mentioned, we don't have the expectation that we're going to notice the difference when we take vitamin D, for example, or we take a multivitamin or whatever we're taking. So I just want to go just a little bit further, and I'll move off of this, but with the whole, because I think there's probably some people in our audience that have doubt in their minds about the whole world of supplementation, and you read different things about it. If you go to the mainstream, they question, maybe it's necessary, maybe it's not, if you eat a healthy diet. But if you could say something based on your research and your understanding of the research and your experimentation, that apart from having a healthy diet, and I think a lot of people agree that even if you go out and find the best foods, there's not as much nutrient as there used to be because of soil depletion and other things. But something gives people maybe a little more cause to take supplementation in various forms seriously, or at least be willing to investigate it further.
Well, if you're willing to microdose, which is an advanced supplementation strategy, you're kind of crazy to not do the baseline supplements. You can get something like vitamin DAKE. These are fat-soluble vitamins. That's DAKE. And those guide minerals into your cells. And you could take a broad spectrum formula of minerals like Minerals 101, which is a formula that's out there. It's got all the minerals that your body needs. That's what's missing from your diet. And if you're eating a lot of plants and vegetables, and especially nuts and seeds and grains, they're probably pulling minerals out of your body, not putting them in because of plant defense compounds called chelators. So don't do the advanced microdosing stuff until you cover the bases. Those are the most boring supplements on the planet. Oh, Dave, you said take a mineral supplement and my fat-soluble vitamins? Yes, because if you're deficient in those, we have thousands of studies showing diverse problems throughout the body. And most of them come down to mitochondria and a few other pathways. So do that, right? Are you getting your B vitamins? Do you have enough amino acids? And why would you microdose if you're eating a bunch of artificial colors and MSG, which are shown to harm your brain? So if you're going to fix your brain, be serious about it. And don't start microdosing until you at least clean up the diet somewhat. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you're having a drink every night, what's the point of microdosing? Alcohol's bad for your brain. That's just how it is. So choose your priorities. I look at microdosing as sort of the icing on the cake, but you need some cake in there before you put the icing on.
Mm-hmm. Good. And is BDNF a marker that we can test for in blood tests over time, or is we establish a baseline for ourselves and we see it's increasing, or is it more of a short-term thing? It might be measured, or
there are no blood tests I've seen that measure BDNF. This is usually done in hospitals and all. It's hard to get into the brain. And one of the problems we have is BDNF. If you eat it, it gets digested. If you inject it, it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's something that's formed inside the brain. But psychedelics induce BDNF inside the brain, which is really interesting. And we know it does that because we've done animal studies and very limited human studies on that. But it's reliable and repeatable that it does that. In fact, in Heavily Meditated, in one of the chapters, I go through all the different psychedelics. Well, what do they do with BDNF and nerve growth factor for neuroplasticity? And then what do they do for the state that you're in? But if you're microdosing, they're not going to change your state. You might see like sub-perceptual shifts in your response time, for instance, or you might say, wow, I feel like I'm more creative today. But they're little. So when I did the 30 days of LSD, I did notice slight performance enhancement, but in line with the softer cognitive enhancing stuff that I use every day anyway. It's not a giant thing. And unless you've studied or developed a practice of monitoring, like, how's my brain doing right now, you're probably not going to really have a good sense for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, then let's move into some. I think there's been a lot of attraction to microdosing seems to be both in the world of biohacking and performance optimization, but it's also people are exploring it as a substitute for SSRIs and people who are dealing with anxiety and depression, where there certainly are suffering, and anything that's going to reduce that suffering, they're going to know it over time, right? Or they probably wouldn't keep doing it. So SSRIs have been helpful for some people, but not a lot of people, and they have a lot of side effects. And so it does seem like microdosing is offering some possibilities for people suffering with anxiety and depression and other things like that.
It's really important, Fleet. If you're taking an SSRI, a full dose of most psychedelics could kill you.
Mm-hmm.
It is meaningful. And that's because with the serotonin dumping that they cause, you can get something called serotonin syndrome. And I've been with people when it happened who weren't even on SSRIs. They just had the genetics for it. And your heart rate goes up, or your blood pressure goes up to 180, heart rate starts racing, and you feel a lot of anxiety. And you need to have benzodiazepines if that happens. And so understand, don't play around with full dose if you're on SSRIs. If you want to get off of SSRIs, quitting them cold turkey can be really chaotic. So people usually will start ramping down. And even some of the supplements that people take for sometimes depression, like methylene blue, which is common in biohacking circles, it's an MAO inhibitor. It's not something you want to take with psychedelics. So be careful with microdosing even. But there are people on, especially people who are ramping off of SSRIs, who might do microdoses. But these are very small microdoses because they're going to have a bigger effect if you're blocking serotonin reuptake. And if you look at what's possible for depression, we know that one of the easiest treatments for it is ketamine, but it's a full dose ketamine. And there are some companies out there trying to get people to take ketamine every day for depression. That is a very bad idea unless you want to be dealing with addiction. But I would say after you've ramped off of the medication, there's a role for a full dose of psychedelics with a therapist or a psychedelic trained facilitator. And there's a role to increase BDNF, which itself can reduce depression, and that would happen through microdosing.
Hmm. Yeah, and certainly anybody that's currently in an SSRI regimen is under the care of a psychiatrist, one would hope, and they should work with their physician in terms of how they, and hopefully they find a physician or a psychiatrist that's willing to be open-minded about these things so that they can make that transition safely.
There's one comment I would make about that. Um, if you tell your psychiatrist and they write it down, it is now part of your medical records. And if you want to buy life insurance, it's going to be part of that. So
Hmm.
it may be worth asking your psychiatrist to stop the transcription or say, you want to have a conversation about potentials and keep that out of your medical records, especially if you're in
Hmm.
a state where it's not legal or if you're planning to buy life insurance. They will go back many, many, many years. So if you tell your doctor you did that, it's going to be on the record. You'll pay more for life insurance. By the way, that should
Hmm.
be illegal for life insurance companies to do that, but they do. So work with your psychiatrist, but work with them without notes.
Hmm. So, again, we're getting a lot of experiential wisdom here. So, um, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about what you've learned through 40 years of Zen by integrating quite a few of these tools into uh, healing and cognitive enhancement. I mean, you're there. You're doing neurofeedback. You're doing meditation training. You're doing your reset process, which is could be a whole other conversation. It's a phenomenal world to release past traumas and triggers and so forth, as well as you're in some cases people use ketamine as part of the protocol at 40 years of Zen. So I wonder if you could just talk about that, maybe from your understanding of the neuroscience involved in that pathway that you're guiding people on, from the level of improving cognitive function and increasing BDNF and neuroplasticity to rejuvenating the mitochondria, all these different things that are going on to improve health and well-being and performance.
40 Years of Zen is the world's first psychedelic assisted neurofeedback program, and we call it PAN. And this new combination is really, really important. And anyone out there can, uh, give you some psychedelics and do neurofeedback. Developing the protocols for this was relatively difficult because the dose is personalized for each person's brain, and we're measuring what's going on in there. But 40 Years of Zen, after about 1,400 weeks of people coming in during 5 days at a time and doing neurofeedback and meditation for hours a day, we've really learned what's going on in there. And your body has its own distributed intelligence, and it's looking to keep to keep you safe. And what psychedelics do when you're taking them at full dose, it's pretty radical because they allow you to see the world kind of the way your body sees the world, as if your conscious brain wasn't in there. And it does not look at all like our normal reality, but it also makes it much easier to observe what's happening and to go in and do work on trauma if you know the steps of the work to do. So at 40 Years of Zen, we've developed a process called the reset process, which is in heavily meditated. People spend $20,000 to come and spend, time with my brain engineering team, or you could do it at home without the tech. It isn't as effective without the tech, but it still does work. And I've done this for thousands of people from the stage, and it's remarkable. The idea here, and you can do this whether you're microdosing or just doing it at home, you'll be more neuroplastic, so it works better, or you can do it if you're having a fuller dose experience. And you realize, oh, I'm going to release some kind of a trigger, something that I know is a trauma, something that is affecting me that I keep ruminating about. So you want to experience a state of awe in order to turn that off. So you think about or re-experience the situation. And if you're on a full dose, when people say they're having a bad trip, it's usually just re-experiencing the trauma from the perspective of the body when it happened. And quite often it's a birth trauma, it's a prenatal trauma, or an early childhood experience that basically your conscious mind forgot about it. But the body's like, that one time I didn't feel safe. It's going to keep replaying that lack of safety. And it's going to appear like, oh, that person's not safe. But it wasn't the person. It was that person triggered an ancient pattern running in your system that you're not supposed to know about. This is the source of the ego. It's the body just trying to stay alive. So if you could go in and say, well, I re-experienced this bad trip, this feeling, but then became curious and I experienced gratitude or awe, which is an off switch. Psychedelics are fantastic for just experiencing awe. So you might have a moment of discomfort when you're having a rough trip. But then if you can tap into that feeling of awe or gratitude, one good thing that happened from whatever that thing was, and then you can step into another state afterwards, which is a state of compassion and seeing things from the other person's perspective. If you do it in the right order and you do it in a focused way, it is possible, with or without the psychedelics, to permanently teach the network in the body, hey, you don't need to do that anymore. And then the thing that would have been a trigger, it just isn't anymore. And I've seen people who've gone through terrible trauma, like being tortured in war, go through. And when they start, they're saying, I was tortured and it was terrible. And they're carrying the emotional weight of it. And then they run the reset process, with or without ketamine, the way we do it 40 years of Zen. And they come out and say, yeah, I was tortured. But there's no more emotional charge on it. And this is the gift of psychedelics. It's neuroplasticity. Plus, there's a unique altered state of healing. And I like to look at it like you're using your phone. You're swiping on it. And you're saying, well, I have a problem. This app just keeps throwing alerts all over the screen. I'm trying to do a message, but just pop, bing, bong, bing, bong. That's just what your nervous system is doing. So you put your phone in an altered state by going into the notifications and saying, I want to turn off these alerts. Psychedelics open the door for this altered state of healing where you can go into the notification panel in your nervous system if you have the right guidance. And you can say, I don't want to do that anymore. And it removes a lot of the morality. But, oh, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. If I could just try harder, or, I'm weak, or I'm a coward, all the things I've thought to myself, or I'm dumb, all the things, all the shame, all the guilt, all that stuff, it's just the body trying to stay alive. And the body's terrible at interpreting reality. So you go in, what's the body's experience? And that's what psychedelics can do. It's what breath work can do. And that's what the neurofeedback at 40 years of Zen can do, with or without the ketamine. And when you're in that state, if you know what to do, you're like, let me just say, don't notify me about this anymore. It wasn't real. It's not important anymore. And that's what creates freedom. That's what creates peace. And one of the most profound things that I've heard from people who've gone through the program was a woman in her 80s, Miriam, who was conceived by parents who were in a concentration camp. And she had terrible, terrible anxiety her entire life. And she said, my entire life I've been searching for peace. I've done everything. She said, I went through the reset process at 40 years of Zen, and for the first time ever in my life, I found peace. I know what it is now. And this is the gift that psychedelics can give you, with the right support, the right integration, the right awareness, the right journaling. It's not like you just take them and then fix it. And when you do it with neurofeedback in that deep way and the structured reset process, it is a fast path to achieving peace in parts of your life that are chaotic. And for me, people who know me now, I'm 6'4", I'm ripped, and I'm peaceful, and I'm loving, and I can connect with people in a way that I did not understand existed. I didn't look like this. I didn't act like this. I didn't feel like this. I had thoughts in my head all the time, intrusive thoughts, anxious thoughts, shame, guilt, like all this stuff. It's just gone. And psychedelics have been a part of that journey. And the largest part has been 40 years of Zen. And I've fasted in caves. I've studied with gurus. I've been around the planet. And I've done all the things, and all of them have merit and value. The thing that has propelled me the most per minute is by far the 40 years of Zen technology, developing that and rolling it out to the world. This is 10 plus years of work on more than 1,000 high-performing people to be able to say this credibly. But that's why I heavily meditated. I wrote this out and giving away my secret sauce, because I want everyone on Earth to be able to have more self-regulation. So that's what we need right now. You're hard to program when you have no triggers.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question about that in a moment, but I want to focus on this issue of safety you brought up. So you spoke about being born with the umbilical cord around your neck and having, this resulting anxiety. You just shared the story of the woman who was conceived in a concentration camp. And I think there are many people that find, despite everything they do, they still have this ground level anxiety. But really, for all of us, I mean, if you look at what's going on in the world, all the untoward behavior by human beings comes out of essentially their lack of safety. As human beings, when we feel safe and we have a reasonable confidence that we can get our basic needs met, we're basically pretty well behaving. We're very collaborative, loving, cooperative. We're social beings, right? And so, this idea of that we of feeling safe and feeling okay, which I think is something that everyone longs for, and a lot of people don't have much access to. What's your understanding of what is the neurophysiology and the neurochemistry of that? What do we know about what that really means? You do the work to where you have that ground level sense of okayness instead of that ground level anxiety that so many people suffer from, knowingly or not, really.
Well, the most important first step is understanding sympathetic versus parasympathetic activation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is controlled through the vagus nerve, and psychedelics affect this very greatly. When you're sympathetic, you're in fight or flight mode. And what I learned in the course of measuring my body was that hundreds of times a day, for no apparent reason, it turns out there's a reason, it's just not what we think it is, my body would shift into fight or flight mode. It would happen at a moment's notice, but it happened so often, it was just like part of life. Doesn't everyone do that? And when I started becoming aware of that through meditation, through biofeedback, and ultimately through neurofeedback, I learned there's a feeling of being parasympathetic or peaceful, and there's a feeling of being sympathetic or anxious. And being sympathetic isn't a bad thing. If you're going to go on a heavy workout, you're going to go play soccer or something, go skiing, you need some of that juice. And if you can't bring a sympathetic state, you're not healthy. But if it happens for no reason and you're trying to focus in a meeting and all of a sudden like someone says something and it sounded like what a bully once said, and right away like your heart rate changes a little bit, you're like, oh, that jerk, and you just got dysregulated. You didn't choose that. Your body just did it to you. So the neurophysiology there is, how do we learn how to strengthen our ability to shift into a parasympathetic state so we're at rest and we're peaceful? And how do we learn to quickly become sympathetic when I need to handle something and then drop back into a peaceful state? It turns out that's not that easy. But what psychedelics can do, especially for someone who's prone to anxiety like I was, they can help you feel a deep, profound parasympathetic state. And they can help you develop a sense of trust in the universe and in other people and in yourself. And having a sense of trust is really important for that. And when you start spending more time in a parasympathetic state, the neurophysiology where we pay the most attention is in the amygdala. The amygdala controls called aggression and anger and going into the sympathetic state. And studies do show that people who meditate can either have a smaller amygdala or less amygdala activation, and actually different parts of the amygdala get activated. When you are in a parasympathetic state, when something happens in the world around you, your brain will pass it through into the thalamus, and you can process it with your human prefrontal cortex, and you can say, oh, that person said something that was really unkind. They must be having a bad day. I hope they get over that. It wasn't about me. And then you take the appropriate action for whatever the situation is, but you're not pissed off about it. But if you haven't done the work, they're going to say it, it's going to push a button, you're going to be triggered, and it's going to go past your logic gates right into the amygdala, and then you're going to become reactive to it, right? And you're going to snap back at them. You're going to yell at your kids, right? So what we want to be able to do is give you the ability through neuroplasticity, through enhancing electrical activity in the brain, to be able to not go into a sympathetic state unless you choose to. And that is what the gurus can do. That is what meditators can do. You can stay calm no matter what's happening in the world around you. In Buddhism, as you well know, the first step on this path is empathy, right? And we've studied empathy in neuroscience as well. You feel other people's pain. Yikes. That might not be a good thing. That's better than not being able to feel their pain. But if you feel it all the time, that's not healthy. So then you start developing compassion, which means you automatically wish other people well before you have a chance to think about it. Your nervous system is now regulated. You're more parasympathetic. And the final step that the Buddhists would call enlightenment and the West would call resilience is that you get to choose your state. And you can keep it no matter what happens in the world around you. So everyone else is going crazy. You're like, I'm still regulated. But here's the kicker. People who are always parasympathetic are dysfunctional. So you want the ability to smoothly and effortlessly switch between the states and to not be too sympathetic and not too parasympathetic. And that is what psychedelics can do through neuroplasticity and what meditation can do and what neurofeedback can do. And that's really the basis of the reset process at 40 Years of Zen. Let's teach you that.
Yeah, I think the integration of these things is really the secret sauce. Um, so I want to go just a little bit further with this. So, we have the whole structure of what's known as the reptilian brain, and it's there just to keep us alive. We can have a lot of sort of fear-based patterning in our limbic brain that'll make us more prone to triggering and more prone to fear, and we're going to interpret the world as being dangerous and so forth. And then also we have, in terms of the pathway of our sensory experience to the amygdala, there's one that goes through our prefrontal cortex ability to process things, but there's another one that goes straight to the amygdala. And so it's getting that sensory information of sounds and visual input and so forth, even before we have a chance to process it. And then I know in your books you've described how at the level of mitochondria, even at those organelles within our cells, their prime directive is simply survive, eat, and procreate, right? And so we have that kind of going on at a way pre-conscious level. So my understanding from reading your books and my own work and so forth is, so we're not at the mercy of these systems that are there to keep us alive, and have that completely running the show all the time. We basically build in a lot of kind of buffering, which could be actual neurogenesis and buffering and strength of various neural networks, so that we, rather than getting triggered because of that sensory input going straight to the amygdala, we still have the ability to bring the experience into where we can process it. Like you said, we know somebody said they said that was unkind, they must be having a hard day, instead of that jerk, I'm all pissed off, right? Or even what's going on there at the level of the mitochondria, that we're not letting that drive the show, because we've built in some buffering of some kind that gives us a chance. Because otherwise, if we don't have that in one form or another, we're just at the mercy of our mitochondria. We're at the mercy of the environment constantly, right? So I wonder if that makes sense to you, and how all these things contribute to that.
Yeah. Neuroscience has made a mistake that's really common in every medical specialty. If you're a kidney doctor, you don't pay that much attention to the liver because you're the kidney guy. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you're a knee doctor, you don't pay that much attention to the foot. It's kind of peripheral, but maybe you notice it occasionally. It's a system. If your foot is broken, your knee's going to hurt because you can't walk right. And the brain is not separate from the body. And the triune brain model we use about the reptilian brain, it's a great way of thinking about the brain structures and kind of ordering them. And modern neuroscience says, well, that isn't actually real because different parts of the brain do different things. Yet it's a very useful model for looking at the brain. Problem is, when I clap my hands, that means that, well, as soon as the sound got to me, I heard it, right? But when we hook your brain up at 40 Years of Zen, your brain, even the amygdala parts, it doesn't get a signal for about 350 milliseconds. The mitochondrial networks in the body, they hold on to the signal for just a brief period, and they decide what you're going to feel about it, what they want to know what to do. And then it's going to go into the brain and it's going to get processed. But that means there's a 350 millisecond censorship process where the body decides what reality is and hands it off to the brain. But neuroscientists, because they study the brain, they're thinking, well, it starts with the amygdala. It starts where, no, why is there a censorship window and who's doing that? What's coming into the brain? What's coming into the brain is modified by the body. The body amplifies certain signals and it completely eliminates other signals. There's a subtle flickering of the screen we're all looking at right now, but we don't see it because the body filter that out. And there's also a subtle buzz in the room around you, but you're not paying attention until you just paid attention right now. So it's filtering those things. Unfortunately, because of trauma, because of environmental programming, or maybe because you just have less energy, the body is amplifying the wrong signal to hand it off to the brain. It's bringing you a big ball of emotion that comes in. And so, of course, the amygdala is dysregulated. But this is happening in the tissues, and then it's going into the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve with 200,000 different branches throughout the body. And that's controlling your sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's pre-brain. So if we're studying the brain, but we don't understand that there's someone messing with the signal from the environment before it gets into the brain, we've got to train the brain and we've got to train the body. And what psychedelics can do, and what neurofeedback and biofeedback and breath work and all of the somatic practices can do, even Tantra can do this, is we're connecting you to your body, making the brain aware of the body in a way that it doesn't have to be, but it can be. And this is why when you're doing advanced meditation in a cave with a guru, like, focus on your heart. You're learning how to feel what's going on in the body. You're creating these new feedback loops, right? Or focus on your toes, whatever it is. So it's the body that has the problem. And then psychedelics, altered states work without psychedelics like neurofeedback. They give you the pathway to tell the body to permanently stop being dysregulated by things in the environment. And that is a faster path than what we used to do, which is, well, random things will occur. Gently set them aside. That's a great skill. Let's just teach the body to not send us signals that aren't very useful and only send us the useful signals. That's really where healing happens.
So what you're saying really points to what has really been at the heart of my work personally and what I teach, but really my own self-experimentation with meditation over many years, is increasing my access to the body and increasing interoceptive awareness. And in my experience, this has not only do I become more aware of the somatic landscape at deeper and deeper levels, but that awareness itself has a regulating factor. So it becomes kind of an auto-regulating system and another pathway to healing. And it would seem, even going back to my earlier question, even though, yes, we're not going to in the moment feel an effect because we took vitamin D, or perhaps not with microdosing either, but the more interoceptive awareness we do develop, the more sensitive we're going to become to all these different things we do, and how we interact with our environment, how we interact with others, and what we eat, and I mean, the food we drink, what we take. We're just going to, because I think one of the reasons often, and we've all many been enculturated into not so healthy diet and using a lot of substances that are not so healthy. We're so numbed out, we're so disconnected from the body that we don't really have any awareness of the impact these things are having on us. Whereas, if you're very sensitive to your somatic landscape and you drink a lot of alcohol, you're going to know how bad that is for you, right? Etc.
It turns out when we clean up the signal from the body, that we start having much more intuition. We have environmental awareness. And you walk into a room, I don't know why this room doesn't feel safe. It's because there's a bad guy in the room, right? Mm-hmm. And even some of the other functions of mitochondria, in my view of the world, these are ancient bacteria. They are, and we can prove this, they're quantumly connected to each other, and they vote with each other using electricity and using chemicals. We actually understand how they talk to each other. They form a collective intelligence inside the body. They also talk to other things. So you really, when you do this, you start feeling your body and yourself more, and you start being able to feel others, really truly feel them, not think about how they're feeling, but actually connect nervous system to nervous system. And this is how Qigong works. This is how Reiki works. This is how healing works. And this is how the great gurus are connecting. They're going down to the lowest level of signaling, which is quantum, and we do that through our mitochondria. In fact, they cluster around these little antennas called microtubules, and they aim them. This is where all the mystical, esoteric stuff happens. But to sort through all this massive signal coming from the body that's so chaotic, well, a practice, a lineage, neurofeedback, or psychedelics, all of these are pathways to just become aware of what the body sees in the world is not like our normal default reality. Healing is an altered state, and going in and Reprogramming your trauma responses and your stress response is also an altered state. Breath work is an altered state, and so is high performance. So it is up to us as scientists and as just human beings. We must master all of the altered states because they're available to us and they're there for a reason. And when we do that, we actually don't get the anxiety and all. And when you become somatically aware through these practices, you might notice every time I eat this, high tryptophan food or something, I feel stressed. Well, don't eat that anymore. In my case, I didn't know what foods made me stressed or not stressed because I was always stressed. So you end up getting a cleaner signal. Once you have a clean signal, you notice when it's disrupted. But if it's always chaotic, you're not going to know. And most of us today are walking around with chaotic signals and dysfunctional electrical systems because we eat the wrong things. So you clean up the diet, clean up the sleep, maybe you microdose, maybe you do some neurofeedback, maybe you do some breath work. But you realize what's going on in there is the single most important thing you can do, because you will never know what's going on in the world around you until you know what's going on inside yourself, because your body is filtering the world around you. You cannot see reality if your body's in chaos.
Yeah, I'm glad you keep bringing us back to get the baseline good, our fundamental health. And if people want to learn more about that, your book Smarter Not Harder, your book Bulletproof Diet, all these and all your books, you go into this in great depth of how to do that basic work to get our the fundamental baseline health in place, and then we can start fine tuning from there, right? So I wonder, we're towards the end of our time here, but a big part of your work is focused on. Obviously, you're focused on health in the now, in the present moment, but you're also focused on the possibilities of longevity and health span, extending that dramatically. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, where that is, and how you feel maybe the intersection of biohacking and microdosing and all fits into that frame, as well as where we're going societally. So you've mentioned several times that it's kind of crazy that some substances are legal and some are not, that all of this should be legalized and made available in safe ways. But where do you see us going, and how does all this fit into the human possibilities for longevity and extending health span?
Biohacking is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so you can have control of your state. And there are different goals. Maybe you wanted to lose the weight, you wanted to get energy, you wanted to turn off anxiety. Or maybe once you do those things, you want to live a lot longer because life is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So longevity is a goal, and so is a higher state of consciousness. They're a goal that you can get with biohacking, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it, that you can do that. So I look at these as going together. And the funny thing is, if you want to live to at least 180 like I do, that's 50% better than our current best. And I've got AI and all kinds of lab tests and neurofeedback. Like, it's not an unreasonable goal to just do a little bit better, and I have 100 years to do it with the rate of progress. Like, not crazy. Well, if your vagus nerve is constantly sympathetic, you will have inflammation throughout your body. We call it inflammaging, and you're not going to make it. If you get Alzheimer's, which is one of the big four things that's most likely to take you out before your time, well, you're going to have a problem. Could microdosing help with Alzheimer's? Yes, because of BDNF, right? So it turns out that a practice of self-regulation is a longevity practice, but it's hard to self-regulate if you eat a bunch of junk food and you have poor sleep. So you've got to get yourself set up so that you're regulated, so you perform better today. And that has a pro-longevity effect as well. So it's hard to separate one from the other. The things that make old people young make young people powerful. And so the goal is get on these practices when you're young, because the benefits go for much longer, and it takes a lot less work and a lot less money to do this when you're young versus getting yourself stressed and old and then trying to reverse it.
So I just want to circle into one thing for our audience. I'm sure in our audience there's many, many different spiritual traditions represented, and people who are not so spiritually or religiously inclined. But there are, in a lot of spiritual teachings, there's, around this whole idea of longevity and extending life, there's ideas that, we really need to keep death present and make peace with death, and clinging to life could be a problem. But what I think some people may not be aware of, or even in some of the yogic traditions, within a lot of yogic traditions, there's actually a real commitment and a vow to extend one's life as long as one can, because we have a unique opportunity in this lifetime to wake up. And people that believe in the possibility of multiple lifetimes, there's no guarantee, what's next, So this is an incredible opportunity we have to become conscious, to wake up. And so if we can extend our life in our health span, we have more opportunity to become more conscious, because, it does take a little time to create the foundation for awakening. Who knows where everybody is already in this lifetime, but in general, over lifespans, it takes some time to do the work to set ourselves up for those kind of awakenings. So the more time we have, the better. So curious if that resonates with you. And I'm just, because a lot of people, they hear the longevity, think, well, why do people want to live forever? That's just, kind of a materialistic aspiration or something.
Yeah. In the world of longevity, I've discovered this. I started in my 20s because I had the diseases of aging before I was 30. So people in their 80s were teaching me how to get better, and the luminaries in the field. Like, wow, this is amazing. But very few young people would go, because you're not worried about aging when you're 20 or 30. You're worried about making your mark in the world. But the tools that make old people young make young people powerful. So we all want to be conscious, and this tool set applies at all ages. What's missing in the world today is our elders, our village elders. There used to be some, and they'd walk around and they'd tell you things like, don't do that, it's going to hurt. And then sometimes we'd listen and we would learn from their suffering. So now things are different, because if we can take our older people and give them the wisdom that they've accumulated and the energy of youth, that gives you so much runway to make the world a better place. You're not going to put plastic in the ocean the way we are today, because you're going to have to eat it, right? You've got to take care of the world around you and take care of society and take care of others, because you're going to be here and you know how to do it, you know how it works. And because when they do things that are dumb, it doesn't make you mad, it makes you compassionate, and you go in and you help. And we're wired to help other people in our bones, inside our very cells. It's part of our core nature to be kind. You just have to find it. And if you want to find it, you got to get those triggers out of the way.
I know a good part of our audience, because we're in the personal growth, self-help kind of world, a good part of our audience is over 50. And, I caught myself saying many times, that old expression, youth is wasted on the young. I don't say it anymore, because I think we're really in a new reality where we can benefit from the wisdom of life experience and reclaim our vitality and live much longer with that kind of vitality and inspiration that we admire that youth have. And we, say, well, they misuse it. They don't have the wisdom of life experience. But I think we're in a new reality where we can have that vitality and that energy and combine with the wisdom of life experience. So what a sweet spot to be in.
It's a great time. One of the other things that will increase your consciousness and your compassion and your energy, if you're over 50, hang out with some people in their 20s. They will give you their young perspective and energy, and you'll give them wisdom. This is how humans work. And for some weird reason, we segregate ourselves in ages. And I sat next to a 22-year-old at dinner last night, and we had the best conversation, and the curiosity. And man, this is great. It's so good. And so I would encourage anyone on a path of personal development, hang out with young people and see yourself in them. And maybe they'll learn from you, and then they won't do all the dumb things that you did or the dumb things that I did, right? So Fleet, you're doing so much great work on helping to make that vision happen. And right now, the world's a little bit weird. And it doesn't take very many highly regulated, wise, conscious people to move reality and to help millions of people, because you can feel a person who's done the work. You walk into a room and the room changes. Well, be one of those people. You got 180 years, you might as well do it. So thanks for doing this episode.
Thank you so much, Dave Asprey. It's been illuminating and fascinating. I really recommend people to check out your books, and especially your most recent book, Heavily Meditated, is absolutely fabulous. So thank you so much. Be well.
Be well.